Nuri. Jimmy Vaca, who is here but just about for a moment.
He's back.
And Carl Weisbrod. Seeing those members present, we now have a quorum. This is the first public hearing in our ongoing effort to engage the public in the generation of ideas about ways in which the city charter can help the city work better. The commission was established by legislation adopted by the city council and has appointment from each of the borough presidents, the public advocate, the controller, the city council, and the mayor. We commissioners, 15 of us, represent a cross-section of New Yorkers. We live throughout the 5 boroughs of the city. We work in diverse fields. We are of different backgrounds, ages, and means. But what we share is a love of our city and a desire to help shape the city's future and to meaningfully participate in changing the document that will provide the basis for that task. Given that you're all here today, you already are aware of the importance of the charter in how we live our everyday lives here in the city. The charter provides the manner in which the city handles public money, provides goods and services to residents. It defines the responsibilities of government officials as well as the responsibilities of our city agencies and provides the framework for the use and development of land within the city. We're all here tonight to propose ideas that can strengthen the compact between citizens and their government. Ideas that can provide a transition from the city of 1989 to the city of 2050. These ideas may rebalance the rights and responsibilities of our agencies or our government officials, may streamline our budget, or may redefine how the city uses its land or purchases its goods and services. We welcome all of your ideas and thank you for sharing them. If you wish to testify today and have not already done so, please fill out a speaker's slip and submit it to our staff who is seated at the table in front. Please make your points clearly and succinctly as we want to understand the issues you raise. We're happy to accept any written testimony you may have either today or over the course of the coming weeks and months. Our web address and Twitter feed is on the pamphlets, which are spread throughout the room and are also located on the table in the front.
Okay.
All testimony, in whatever form you choose to submit it, will be included in the record and made available to all of the commissioners, staff, and to the public. We will also hold Twitter and telephone town halls in the coming months to provide more opportunities to hear from you. We hope to gather a robust set of proposals and we'll be conducting additional hearings in the spring to present the results of our research and analysis and receive further feedback. By September of 2019, we will have shared with you a set of revisions to the charter which will be put before you, indeed before the electorate, on the ballot of November 2019. Again, we thank you for being here and taking part in this momentous task. We will begin tonight's meeting and hear testimony from all of you. We will limit testimony to 3 minutes per person in order to ensure that we can hear from all of you who wish to speak. After you testify, one of the commissioners may have questions for you to follow up on your ideas or proposals. I would like to call up the first 2 people who will be speaking. The first person is Hannah Birnbaum, and if you could just come down to the table here, Hannah. And the second person is Jed Holtz, and if you could come down also, Jed. Hannah?
Can everybody
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, Commission Chair Benjamin and Commission members. My name is Hannah Birnbaum and I coordinate 32BJ's engagement with new development projects here in New York City. On behalf of our 85,000 members in the city, thank you for holding these hearings and for giving your time and expertise to this important process. Over the coming weeks, 32BJ officers and members will be providing testimony to the Commission covering a range of matters. We will be speaking about how the Charter can be revised to allow for greater community participation and more broadly felt and enduring benefits from the city's land use policies, how the city's procurement practices can be made more equitable and transparent, and how the Charter can be amended to further embed social justice in our city's laws. Tonight I will be expanding on the first of these issues, the need for a more equitable and democratic approach to land use decisions. For over 100 years, New York City has been shaped by its zoning laws. They have defined the physical structure of our buildings, where people live and work, and how we get around. Zoning laws also determine when and how community voices are heard and what is valued when land use decisions are made. With the economy and population of New York City growing strongly, there is an urgent need to structure our land use policies and procedures to ensure that the interests of working people are promoted and their voices are heard. As the union that represents the majority of workers in the property services industry, we support development that expands economic opportunity and creates good living wage jobs. At the same time, we are acutely aware of the affordable housing crisis squeezing families across the 5 boroughs and the need to ensure that low and moderate income people, including the workers that this city relies upon, can stay in the neighborhoods they love. There are a number of areas that we believe the Commission should explore in order to achieve a more just and inclusive approach to land use. First, I want to talk about expanding discretionary public review to cover more new development, especially larger projects. Much of New York City's new development and the majority of new housing is constructed as of right. This means that comparatively few projects come with opportunities for community stakeholders to weigh in about their impacts and advocate for important benefits like good jobs and affordable housing. Residential and commercial projects that exceed 100 units or 100,000 square feet consistently stand to have a significant impact on workers and the standards they have fought for. Projects that exceed this size threshold should be required to go through a discretionary land use review with opportunities for public participation. We also want to specifically raise new construction on NYCHA land as meriting a full uniform land use review procedure or ULURP requirement. The city is proposing to build thousands of additional infill units on NYCHA property, but dispositions of NYCHA land do not have to go through ULURP. We are encouraging the Commission to mandate that any new structures on NYCHA land be subject to ULURP so that the communities that are affected have a chance to weigh in. We are also examining other specific types of land use actions where it may make sense to mandate ULURP or special permits. These include large projects or that rely on zoning lot mergers and minor modifications to previous zoning decisions that lead to significant numbers of new units. Second, I want to talk about making the land use approval process more transparent. Through our engagement in ULURP and at the Board of Standard and Appeals, we have learned firsthand how difficult it can be to access complete information about proposed development projects and track where they are in the approval process. This limits opportunity for important public discussion about development and chances to raise and address legitimate community concerns. We're suggesting that can I have 20 seconds? Or?
20 seconds.
All right. So we're suggesting that the Commission consider measures to promote increased public awareness, like creating a central database for land use applications, and requiring these to be posted online for a period of time before they're certified. I've submitted written testimony. We have a couple of other suggestions. One about attaching building service prevailing wage when the city disposes of public property, and another about improving the integrity and democratic oversight of the Board of Standards and Appeals. So I'll leave it there, and you have our more detailed written testimony. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. I see.
I think you have just one copy, and I'll send it to the Commissioner.
Okay, no, we can copy it later and distribute it. I was just looking to see if it was here. Are there any questions? Hearing none, thank you. Jed?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jed Holtz. I'm the New York City organizer for the Freedom Socialist Party. On behalf of my organization, I'm calling on the Charter Revision Commission to take this historic opportunity and address some of the most undemocratic and unjust realities of our city. I'll focus on 2 tonight. The first is a denial of the basic democratic right of voting to non-citizens. We all know immigrants built this city, and their labor makes a massive contribution to the economy, an estimated $40 billion a year statewide. Non-citizens pay millions in property, sales, and payroll taxes in New York City, and yet they have no vote. This amounts to taxation without representation. But you have the power to help change that. A number of municipalities across the nation are considering measures to allow non-citizen voting, which was the standard practice in this country until the 1920s. Several cities in Maryland, including Hyattsville and Mount Rainier, have granted non-citizens the right to vote in municipal elections, and New York City must too. The lack of this right is the city's greatest barrier to civic participation in government. Let's fix this. Otherwise, all the talk in support of immigrants is just empty rhetoric. The people who make the city run, who create its culture, its profits, and its vitality should have a say at the voting booth. Granting non-citizens this basic democracy is just and logical. The second injustice we must address is the complete lack of accountability of the NYPD. You will hear testimony in support of an elected civilian review board later tonight, and we call on you to include it in the Commission's recommended charter revisions in November 2019. By being democratically elected and empowered to make binding decisions, the elected civilian review board gives the public recourse against an extremely powerful institution that has failed to police itself. This could bring justice to those who have suffered discriminatory, demeaning, and violent misconduct at the hands of the police. It empowers those most vulnerable in our society, women, people of color, non-citizens, formerly incarcerated, to defend themselves. And with an elected special prosecutor, independent of the DA, handling police cases, we'd have unbiased and rigorous prosecution of cops. The time is overdue for addressing these crises. Immigrants and all New Yorkers deserve the ability to have a voice in elections and against police misconduct. Amendments to allow non-citizen voting and to replace the CCRB with an elected and empowered board will simply move our society closer to a humane and democratic city we all deserve. Please put these issues on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Holtz? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next two speakers are Caitlin Greeno. I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. And Malcolm Green. Ms. Greeno, have I pronounced that correctly?
It's Greeno.
Greeno, okay.
Good evening. This Charter Commission has the chance to create solutions to one of the biggest problems in our city, our crisis of accountability with the NYPD. When the people of New York are on the wrong end of police misconduct, they have no real power to defend themselves, no power to gain real justice. The police are literally allowed to get away with murder, and the city does nothing to protect its residents. Eric Garner, Delron Small, Mohammed Ba, Deborah Danner, Malcolm Ferguson, Ramarley Graham, Nicholas Hayward Jr., Sean Bell, Eleanor Bumbers, Amadou Diallo. The list of people who have been killed by the NYPD is long, and time and again we have seen the officers involved walk away with their careers intact or even improved. Standing alongside some of these known names is an even longer list of lesser-known New Yorkers who have been tasered, beat up, threatened, and abused by police and have been left to suffer with no recourse. Entire communities of color are under siege. Parents are scared to let their children walk alone, even in broad daylight. Today, the appointed, not elected, Civilian Complaint Review Board is where New Yorkers are supposed to go when they have been mistreated by the police. Last year, the CCRB investigated less than a third of the nearly 5,000 complaints it received. They substantiated only 264, determining that police had mistreated someone and deserved disciplinary action in only 5% of all reports. Even when the CCRB does find wrongdoing, they can only make a recommendation to the police commissioner, who can then downgrade or dismiss any of their recommendations. And in fact, this is what happens most of the time. Last year, 73% of disciplinary recommendations by the CCRB's APU were watered down or ignored. The police police themselves. That's the truth, and New Yorkers know it. The CCRB doesn't work, and New Yorkers know it. But we can create something that does. Our campaign has given you an amendment to fix this problem. It creates an elected board that has the power to investigate and make binding decisions on abusive officers. People who suffer on the wrong end of a police fist, taser, or gun deserve a board that represents them, stands up for them, and can hold police accountable when they abuse their power. This is what our amendment for an elected civilian review board establishes. In the worst criminal cases, the people of New York desperately need an independent prosecutor to remove the conflict of interest in the DA who works closely with the police. Our amendment also addresses this, an independent elected prosecutor that would take on those cases without bias. We've submitted a printed copy of our finished amendment to each of you. We've spent 3 years talking to the community. We are sick and tired of needing to chant Black Lives Matter. This is your chance to prove that they do. The people of New York need protection against police abuse. Propose this amendment and do your part to solve this crisis. Because without a board and prosecutor that has the power to stand up to police abuse, we're only waiting for another death in the headlines. Thank you.
May I ask you a question? Do you envision that the CCRB would have an elective CCRB would have direct power to discipline the police officers, or are you suggesting that the board would be elected and would still either have to forward their recommendations to the prosecutor or to the police commissioner for their recommendations to be implemented?
So the board would be elected by the people of New York, and they would hear complaints, investigate cases, and when they find wrongdoing, their decisions would be binding. Their disciplinary decisions would be binding. And then the elected prosecutor would take on criminal cases.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Just wanted,
Sal?
you are aware that the city council and the mayor passed the Community Safety Act, which includes an inspector general for the police department that's not connected to PD. When they would use it.
Well, but the DA still prosecutes the cases where police commit crimes, and the DA also works closely with the police, so that's where we see the conflict of interest and the problem.
Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Karras?
Would you do this right now?
You need the microphone. You gotta pick it up, take it off. Pull.
In addition to the Inspector General and the Department of Investigation, there's also the mayoral control. There's a mayoral controlled police board. There's the internal affairs and the CCRB. Would this subsume all of those functions? Would this just replace the CCRB?
We believe that the people of New York deserve to elect a board who would be able to oversee the police who are supposed to be working for us. So as far as the details of that, I would have to get back to you. I don't know, but I know that our legislation creates a board that's elected, and that's what we're calling for, because we believe it's really important.
Anyone else? Carl?
Yeah, I'm still a little unclear about what you mean by the power to discipline. That power would be up to and including discharge of the officer, or
yes.
also, but any criminal matter would be referred to a DA?
Would be referred to an independent elected prosecutor in lieu of the DA.
not a DA.
Right now, it's done by the DA, so instead it would be done by this independent elected prosecutor.
Thank you.
Allison?
Sorry, I think I'm also just a little confused. So we'd be electing both the Civilian Complaint Review Board and an independent prosecutor separately, or the CCRB would have the prosecutorial power within it?
Well, the elected civilian review board would refer criminal cases to the elected special prosecutor.
So we'd be creating multiple new elected positions.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
For the non-criminal disciplinary actions, have you thought at all about how it relates to the collective bargaining agreement that the police officers have with the city and the there's a disciplinary, one assumes I don't actually know the details of the police officer's contract, or even if it's open still, I don't know. But one assumes that there's some disciplinary procedures that's negotiated between the PBA and the city, and I didn't know whether you had any kind of how the new outside disciplinary procedures would relate or impact that.
I'll have to get back to you on the details, but just to go back to what we're calling for is that we believe that the people of New York decide to have a say, and that board should have binding discipline, because as we can see, the police commissioner waters down and ignores a lot of the recommendations, so it's a problem.
Sal?
Police officers are public employees, as you know, and all public employees are covered by state law, collective bargaining agreements, which basically outline what the procedure is for disciplining. Whether it be a police officer, whether it be a school teacher, anyone who works for the city has this due process. I mean, you would agree that police officers deserve due process.
That's right.
Absolutely, we all deserve due process.
So how do you get around addressing the issue of disciplining police officers, and getting around what is civil service law, which is an Albany issue?
That's right.
I'll have to bring this to the legislative team and we can get back to you in writing. But I do know that this question has come up several times when we've presented this, and we've done a thorough review of all state law, and we can't find anything in the state law that says that this couldn't happen. Like, there's some concern about how the police commissioner, people say that it's in state law, that the police commissioner has the ultimate authority, but
it's about civil service law, whether it be a police officer, whether it be a sanitation worker, whether it be a school safety agent, they're all under the rubric of civil service law, Section 75, 76, which mandates due process. You would agree that police officers deserve due process, right? You would agree that?
yes, I already said that.
Jim?
Along similar lines, have you guys looked at the state law implications of creating a local city prosecutor? Because it's my understanding that district attorneys are city employees, but state office, they are created by state law. So it would be a similar, I'm wondering if you've done research on the ability of the city to have a local city prosecutor created by city charter.
I'll have to bring that back to the legislative team and get back to you.
Thanks.
Reverend Miller?
I'm very interested in hearing more about your proposal. I do know there's a special prosecutor placed in the Attorney General's office when it comes to cases where unarmed civilians die at the hands of the police. So if your proposal came to fruition, I'd like to know how potentially 3 levels of prosecution would take place. Special prosecutor in the state, your independent elected prosecutor and the district attorney, some of which don't want a special prosecutor. I'd be more interested in hearing about how that would play out.
Quick question, maybe. It seems as if you've put a lot of thought and research into your proposal. Is it possible you could share that research with us?
The research itself, you have our legislation there
Right.
in front of you.
But I was just wondering if there was more legal research that you could point to on these issues.
Sure, well, certainly any question that came up that has to do with legislative items, I'll bring to the legislative team to answer.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you, Ms. Greeno. Mr. Green?
Thank you. I'm not here with the organization. I actually caught wind of this not too long ago, and I actually I have a terrible headache today. I'm sorry, excuse me, I'm not at my best. I did want to come down here though still and comment on this public hearing because I thought this was important. An elected civilian complaint review board is probably the least you can do, to be honest with you. I'm quite frankly disgusted at the way people, citizens, humans have been treated in this whole country, but we're specifically dealing with New York City, and it's been no different here. The bottom line, I think, is and I don't know the details of police training, but from friends that I have that are in uniform and other places, let me know that it's an us against them mentality when being trained. When you have policies that have police that don't live in the communities come in, police and leave, it's like an abusive situation. It's set up to be as no accountability. I can do what I want, and I know these guys. I mean, this is not something I'm just sort of coming in as a citizen saying, I wonder if this is happening. I thought about going into situations I've had myself, but I figured 2 minutes and probably 2 hours wouldn't be enough, to be honest with you, just in the way things have gone. I think that, again, this is the light end to have an elected civilian complaint review board that has some kind of teeth, or else, you know, this is a situation where you're pushing a population to the point where they will only go so far. So this is a situation where you want to, you know, represent as a civil body, I don't know, this charter body or whatever, or, you know, passing it over to the city council and to state legislatures, wherever it needs to go, because this is an opportunity that I didn't want to squander by not saying what I'm feeling like I need to say. You need to do something. People are dying, people are being choked out, people are not even reporting so many things that are happening. Aside from that, it presents a climate where children are raised in an atmosphere of fear. I mean, you don't even listen to your dad when a cop is there and tells you something different. I mean, that is an undermining of a whole familial bond. I mean, I could get, you know, it's 2 minutes and I'm gonna run out, but I did want to say that. And I'm sorry I don't have my thoughts a little more together on this. I will come prepared if we have more of these meetings. The second thing I wanted to mention is and I don't know what reach you guys have with this, but there's a primary tomorrow, but so many of us who aren't Democrats and Republicans can't vote in these primaries. And I think that sways it in a way that it's, as we've seen in our last presidential election, some things happen that probably shouldn't have happened as a result of, you know, not just primaries, but other shenanigans. So I think that would help be more transparent with respect to what the people in this city want and what they're able to express through primaries, through civilian complaint review boards, etc. I think that we're in a day and age where things are leaning towards many of these governmental bodies are just sort of vapors of actual, it's like the silage of a cake that was baked and left the room, you can still smell the cake. And that's sort of the way I'm seeing a lot of governmental bodies, and I would hope that, just hear me, you know, you can ask me questions if you will, that's not an issue, but please do this at a minimum side and whatever you can do more forceful, and to be honest, to hold the police accountable and give them the same due process we get. I wouldn't deny them, they're the citizens just the same.
Thank you, Mr. Green. what you said essentially correct, that you are interested in us examining the election of a civilian complaint review board as an elected body. Number two, it seemed to me you were also suggesting reinstating a residency requirement for police. Would you say that?
Yeah, those are the weeds of it, right? My thinking is, and you guys, that's what you guys, I mean, I don't want to be rude, but that's sort of what you guys do as elected officials. You go through the weeds, you hammer out the law, you find where this can work. I'm just a citizen coming in saying that when you grow up in a black neighborhood, which I did, and all you see is people that don't live there, and they talk to you in front of your mom, in front of your friends in ways that you go to jail when somebody else, a common person, does that the way you react to them. And you have this fear of even responding verbally because they don't get the same due process you do.
Yeah, and the last thing I heard you talking about was nonpartisan voting.
Right.
Okay.
That's absolutely. I mean, I would imagine more and more people are not registering under Democrat or Republican these days, if I can say those two words, and they need to be heard just as well. So.
Thank you very much.
Please.
Questions? Council.
If I could, on the last subject matter, the elections, are you advocating for open primaries or nonpartisan elections? What would your preference be?
Open.
Again, you caught me at a disadvantage. I'm not certain of the difference. I think that a person, if they're registered to vote, should be able to vote, whether they're independent, Republican, Democrat. If there's a primary, they should be able
open
to participate,
primary.
period. So I don't know where that falls under.
That's right.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Green and Ms. Greeno. Do me a favor. Next up.
If they call me, can you videotape them?
Next up, Carl
They call me.
Lanzano
If they call me, can you
and
videotape?
Linda Pedrosa. Mr. Lanzano?
My name is Carl Lanzano. I'm a member of Community Board 12. I chair the Health and Human Services Committee. The reason I'm here is to talk about changing the situation in the council for the community board. Community boards are the go-to agencies that citizens go to when there is a problem or civic question. Now, we have excellent representatives in our councilmen, in the state assemblymen, senators, but as good as they are not us. The people themselves, I believe, should have direct representation in the city council. That is why I'm proposing creation of a community board council for the city of New York. It would consist of elected volunteer representatives, one from each community board, who would meet on a regular basis to discuss and seek solutions to the issues of the city. Then they would elect one from each borough to be a borough representative to the council, and they would have a vote. Being a volunteer position, politics would be kept at a minimum, and the allegiance would be to the people of the city who work the hardest to make the city work. And having a vote, that would be 5 county votes added, would allow the borough representatives to connect with every community board in his or her borough, be able to effect legislation, and to give the people the information that he or she directly obtained from his experience, and also to convey to the council hands-on needs that the people do have, and they should pass them on. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fiala?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Manzano, this is an interesting proposition. The community boards have gone through a number of revisions in the 70s, the 89 charter. Right now, there are 59 community boards. Correct me if what I'm saying is wrong, because I want to get the substance of your recommendation. You're proposing that one from each of the 59?
Yes. One from each of the 59, well, in each borough.
Okay.
You'll have, yes, one from each of the 59. They'll have a committee in each borough. And that borough would elect a borough representative, which would be have a voting seat on the city council.
So in effect, 5 additional members would be added to the city council in the capacity of community board borough-wide officials.
Yes.
The net impact being increasing the city council by 5, but the people selecting those 5, those are community board members, or are these borough-wide elections participated by voters?
Well, and I don't know if I said it, but they would be volunteers, which being unpaid, which would not make them
so
allegiance to political people.
So the borough entities would choose their representative for the borough, and then those 5 would go to the city council and have the right to propose legislation and vote on legislation, but they would be in a volunteer capacity.
Right. So if you have 12 community boards in the Bronx, they would each send a member to the council, rather to a newly created committee. That committee would form its own president, vice president, take minutes, and every meet on a regular basis, and they would have one representative from the borough, all volunteer, all just going back to the people in the community. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Let's start with Lindsay. Here, Lindsay.
I had a follow-up question. There is already some existing linkages between the borough presidents and community boards. That is quite extensive, as I understand it. Are there specific deficiencies in that relationship or system that you are trying to address?
No, the representatives we have are excellent. But to me, I feel that they're elected officials, and as good as they are, they sometimes are holding to the process rather than the people. They do come to the meeting, they do respond to our requests, and in my community board, at least I know, they're very responsive. But I feel if we had somebody that could be an unpaid representative to sit in on the city council and give direct feedback to the people that come every month, and people that go to the community board and say, why can't we have this? Why can't we have this? This is very good, and thank you. And the people from the board can talk to the people, and they don't have to worry about being elected again. They would just give the feedback that they get.
Thank you. Mr. Vaca?
I think your idea has some merit. It needs to be considered. I do have some questions about it. In 1978, I was a chairman of a community board, and we did have what was called a coalition of community board chairpeople, and we did meet. That coalition in 1978 had enough support where we hired an executive director and we tried to function. It became unwieldy and it didn't really continue to function after a period of time. So, but I do think you're raising the issue that community boards, because we have 59 of them, they don't have a vehicle where they can register how they feel with one voice on certain policy and budget issues. So I see that, but I also then say that when you're talking about boroughs, my question comes up, what is the role of the borough service cabinet? What is the role of the borough board? Are those entities effective? If they're not effective, why not? Is that a partial answer? Because the borough service cabinet has all the district managers and the borough board has all the community board chairpeople. But you're talking about a citywide entity. I'm just wondering if using those existing entities and then creating a citywide entity to be advisory, because I don't see, I know for a fact that right now all city council members must be elected. So to have someone on the city council as a voting member who's not elected, I think would be problematic from the point of view of the Voting Rights Act, if for nothing else. But I would appreciate that you submit something to this body that would further clarify and define what you're talking about, because I do think it may have some merit if we can get more specifics and we can talk.
Well, if I can respond. Some of those agencies you mentioned, people just don't know about. So they're offices that people do not connect with. The other thing is, they are elected. They're not, and that's, so they are elected by the people that go to the community board meetings and try and do the best for the community. And the other thing is, they're volunteers and they would have a vote, which I'm sure your 1978 committee didn't have. But if it had a vote in the council, then that would give community boards more than advisory capacity, which they largely have now. We do have some, we do have a lot of power as a community board and influence, and we're very respected, I agree. But this would give the people in the community board real teeth, and they could affect the legislation.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Lanzano, and now Ms. Pedrosa.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Linda Pedrosa. I'm a member of Community Board 5. My main issue regarding the board is that we need to have term limits when it comes to electing the chair and executive committees at the board. We have our chairperson who has been at the board for 10 years, and honestly, this is gonna be the 11th year. And I feel honestly so embarrassed because the reputation of Community Board 5 is so poorly that even it is affecting our community. What reflects in the board reflects in the community. When I came to Community Board 5, my eagerness, my desire was to intervene and intercede for the community because we are the voice, the eyes, and the ears of the community, and our votes count. But the thing is that at times in our boards, what happened is that there is some interest, favoritism, and I don't see that this is right, that we should do things honestly the right way. Proceed with the community openly. In addition to that, this is a little something different that I would see that we should have more power in the community, though we are volunteers, because we live in the community. We live and we know what's going on and what affects our community. And with these new housing developments, which in a sense I am not disagree, you know, I agree with progress, but what my concern is the environment, that we need space, we need to protect our ecosystem. We need to, because if we lose these things, then you know, we can really get. I don't want to see a place all built up in concrete and tall buildings. I believe in progress, but I wish and would have neighborhoods not to lose their identity and not to have, you know, these mom and pop stores who really build up our community. We need to get back to restore these basic values, and I'm going to bring it here: compassion and love and understanding for one another, with bipartisan, you know, but the most important thing is to, you know, to understand each other, not to look at the difference, but look what can unite us and bring us together. Thank you.
Thank you. The mayor's current Charter Revision Commission has recommended, and it will be on the ballot this November, that there be a term limit for all members of community boards.
Great.
That satisfies that first issue that you raised about.
Yes, because the thing is, we preach to people, to the children. We have to face changes in the future when you graduate, when you're in school. And then at times when it comes to us, we want to stay, and that's what's happening in our board, with the same old routine. There is no change. We need to change, because when this country was built on the change from the 13th colony. Now is the United States of America. That caused a change. We need to change to see new things, to evolve, and that's what our problem is at times. We are afraid to face changes, and that's what's happening in my community board 5. I love this community, I love my board, but the way I see things, they're not going on the right direction.
Thank you.
Thank you.